Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen Neighbor stories. In this video, I bought an old broken lake cabin to renovate it myself and make my dreams come true. But a trespassing neighbor claimed that my property is her private parking spot. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. The first story starts like this. All my troubles began when I first got the lake house. It was a property that would have put many people off, with holes in the roof and raccoons under the floor, but not me. I worked as a cybersecurity consultant by day and a hobby house flipper by night, spending a lot of time rebuilding rundown houses to sell on. While I usually am pretty sensible with what I can afford, when the lake house came up for auction, I did go a little overboard in my estimates, leading me to take out a second mortgage on my house to afford it. I was confident, however, that any money I put up front would now be returned tenfold by the end of this project, and not just because of the cabin's potential itself. Aside from being in a remote and picturesque location, the property came with a large piece of land around the lake itself, with plenty of potential and possibilities. As the purchase was being finalized by our solicitors, I met with the homeowner in hopes that they could shed light on the house's existing problems or anything else I should know. They were a kind old gentleman whose deteriorating health had sadly got the better of him, leaving the lake house to fall into ruin. I felt bad for him but promised I would take care of the place in his stead. When the subject moved on to the local area, he had little to say and I had to prod him for any bit of information like he was withholding in an interrogation. Through these negotiating tactics, I learned that he had one neighbor who lived nearby but not around the lake itself, though he did say that I was unlikely to see much of them. What a load of baloney. It was about 2 weeks later when I next returned to the lake house, this time with nothing but the keys and my trusty bag of tools. As I had done many times before with other houses, I started my work in the kitchen, what I like to consider the heart of the household. I was tearing down one of the plasterboard walls when I heard a frantic woman's voice echoing from the front door, saying, "Hello," followed by, "I know you're in there." I stepped out into the hall and gave the curious visitor quite a fright. I'd forgotten something important at that moment, and well, I was red from physical exertion, breathing heavily, holding a claw hammer, and I was covered in dust and rubble. The way her eyes widened, I thought I might have given her a heart attack, but she soon settled after I cleaned up a bit. Karen introduced herself as the neighbor who had come by to talk to the old homeowner, who she said was a good friend. Apparently Karen had no idea that the lake house was even put up for sale, which I found strange if they had been friends. Deciding not to press the issue, Karen left me to my work, shuffling out the door with what I thought looked like a bunch of flyers hidden behind her back. I thought nothing of it at the time, and after a few more hours I drove home for a well-deserved rest. A few days passed uneventfully, and before I knew it, I was driving back to the lake house on Friday night. I had planned to get there earlier, but a traffic pileup on the highway had other ideas, forcing me into a nocturnal work schedule instead. As I made my way down the remote dirt track to the lake house, I was caught off guard by lights up ahead, as well as a faint music in the distance. As I got closer to the disturbance and onto the threshold of my new property, I passed a number of cars that had been parked and ditched on the grass. I also located the source of the noise, a small group of people who gathered by the edge of the lake. Stepping out of my car, my foot immediately met with paper. Picking it up, I noticed it was a flyer saying, "Party time, Friday 6 late, usual place." What the hell? Well, I thought there had been some kind of mistake, and then it hit me. The flyers that Karen had been carrying when I met her, it had to be these. Searching through the crowd, I saw a lot of unfamiliar faces and one familiar one, which was Karen. Despite it being my land, Karen looked like a mixture of shock and surprise that I was here, as if I was actually crashing her party. What the hell is all of this? I shouted to try and get my voice heard over the deafening R&B, but Karen then went back to dancing, so I assumed she did not even hear me. Pulling her gently aside to a quieter area, I tried again and asked, "What the hell is all of this?" To which I then got a sarcastic wave as she moved her hand around. "What does it look like?" "It is a party." I sighed. "Why is it on my land?" I said, trying to hold onto my temper. Karen visibly scoffed at me and said, "You may be new around here, but you don't own the whole lake area, buddy," she retorted as she stepped closer to shout in my face. As the argument grew, the music seemed to dim and a few of her friends came over to join us, equally irate at my presence. Now being shouted at by a chorus of drunken middle-aged idiots, I stepped back to address the crowd and said, "This here's my land, you're all trespassing on private property and I need you to leave." The others stared blankly at me before bursting into laughter, not at all intimidated or fazed by my words. The music then grew to a roar as the party resumed, but I was not finished yet. Moving through the crowd, I turned down the music against repeated slurs and boos. "I'm serious, you all need to go or I'm gonna call the cops." This time I was met with a little bit more seriousness, but not the right kind. I was assaulted by a flurry of cups, shoes and trash from the angry partiers who followed me back to my car. Resigned, I drove back away from the lake amidst cheers of victory as the party continued. They may have thought that they had gotten one over on me, but little did they know there was a storm coming their way now. After driving home, I immediately swapped to my pickup truck and made my way back to the lake house, but I did not go back alone. After explaining how my night was going, my friend, who owned a local towing service, was more than happy to help out. I crept slowly up the dirt track, making sure the party would drown out our mission as my friend and I carefully towed their cars away. I made sure to record everything I could with my cell phone, from the cars, the mess and the ongoing party in the distance, so that if Karen decided to invite the cops, I would have some protection to fight her with. To avoid too much noise, I used my pickup truck to tow them to a lay-by near the main road where my friend would be waiting to impound them. 30 minutes later, my lawn was empty once more, though deep tire tracks remained engraved into the mud. Before I left the lake house for the last time that night, I pinned a legal towing notice from my friend on a nearby tree and scribbled on it, "No phone service and have not installed Wi-Fi yet. Good luck hitching a ride at the main road." I knew it was childish and provocative, but I couldn't help myself. I only wish I could have been here when they finally realized they were stranded out there. I then went out to a bar to buy my friend a drink after a long day. We watched football and forgot about my stressful neighbor situation. I got to work a little late the next day with a lack of sleep and a mild hangover, reminding me why I don't do this more often after hitting my 40s. You may be wondering, but no, that is not a typo. I'm at work on a Saturday. After a recent sick day, I opted to come in this weekend to catch up on an important deadline, but hey, at least the office was quiet. I was making my coffee when my phone vibrated and nearly startled me into dropping my mug. It was an unknown number, so I did what I usually would and ignored it, expecting it was probably a scam or wrong number. After a few more calls from the same number, they finally left a voicemail, which I felt curious enough to listen to. "Who the F do you think you are, you piece of crap? We've been throwing parties here for years and now you come along and think you can stop me? You moved my car, my friend's cars. This is outrageous. That property was our personal parking spot. I'm not gonna take this, you hear me? I'm gonna take the lake house and you better be there." Karen was furious, but it served them right after it was still trespassing. Undeterred by her calls, I continued work and my phone felt silent for a while. I wondered if she had run out of steam or if I should actually be worried about the lake house. After my phone rang again, I found myself unconsciously answering it, forgetting about who it probably was. "Hello?" I asked. "Told you to be at the lake. If you ain't there in 10 minutes, you will wish you bulldozed this dump." And with that, she hung up. Deciding to take matters a little more seriously, I left work early to deal with her. When I got to the lake, Karen was nowhere to be seen, but my front door was wide open. Stepping inside, I heard smashing and found Karen mid-rage tearing through the old living room. She then turned her attention to me, saying, "There he is, the hotshot, the party popper." I interrupted her. "I warned you, Karen. I asked you to leave. You gave me no other choice." Other than being red in the face, Karen looked surprised that I was standing up to her. "The old neighbor gave us permission to use the land and we were not hurting anybody. You didn't have to be such an a-hole." "Permission? There's no way. They never told me about any permission for parking or parties. In fact, they said that you would be a quiet neighbor." Karen did not seem to believe me, but the subject changed when she pulled out a familiar notice. It said, "Not only did you crash and ruin my party, you expect me to pay for this?" She shoved the towing notice into my hands, detailing a total charge of $500 on retrieval. "My friends are pissed, and so am I. They are blaming me for this whole mess and want me to pay." In a sigh, she stopped to catch her breath as I kept my eyes down to read the notice, trying to give her as little attention as possible. I then responded to Karen in a calm, intimidating tone that next time this happens, police will be involved and that I will put her feet to the fire. She looked shocked after my response. In a scared tone that caught me off guard, Karen began speaking again in a soft and sultry voice. "Say, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I did not mean to make you so mad. I'm a little low this month, so if you can pay that charge and apologize to my friends, we can call it square, okay? I was astonished by the sudden shift in attitude, and I had to look up from the paper just to check that it was actually Karen still here and not someone else. Not only did she want to pay her bills from the cars I towed away myself, she actually wanted an apology for ruining her party. Oh hell no. Now you listen here. I'm obviously not gonna pay for your cars, and I'm not going to allow any more parties. If I see you on my land again, it won't be a tow truck I will call, but it will be the cops next time. You think I'm joking? Then go ahead. I've got plenty of footage from last night, and I'm sure we can always ask the old homeowner to testify if need be. Speechless, I could see the rage on Karen's face dissolve into embarrassment as she left without another word. True to my word, I have the cops on speed dial for the next time Karen tries anything, but after 2 weeks of peaceful silence, I doubt she's gonna be a problem for me ever again. And the next one is an absolutely amazing malicious compliance story that you don't wanna miss. It is titled, "Boss yells at me for following instructions and tells me to do the opposite next time. It backfires." About 20 years ago, I used to work as an office assistant at a small company where we would receive orders from clients and then we would assign the work to one of our freelancers who were well compensated and respectable professionals. My boss was such a professional herself, and when possible we would assign that work to her. I accepted the minimum wage job because she told me I could sometimes get tasks assigned as a freelancer with the nice freelancer compensation, that she would personally train me, and that in less than a year I would most likely be promoted to a regular freelancer and make very good money. This sounded like a great career path to my young and naive ears. One of the things she had told me in the very beginning was that when you take over an order, you become like a project manager for that order. You need to make sure that the freelancer would finish the work on time, as the work was usually time sensitive. Additionally, she loved going on long lectures about how she is paying me minimum wage for me to use my brain and figure things out where necessary. These lectures were mainly a vehicle for her to stroke her own ego by explaining to her employees how our brains were not as smart as hers. One day our biggest corporate client had placed a large order that was due on a Monday by noon, and we had assigned the task to my boss to do over the weekend. It was Monday morning, time was ticking, and my boss had not arrived at the office. The client had called to see if we were gonna provide the work soon, as it was urgent. I tried calling my boss, who did not pick up her mobile. I called half an hour later and texted her. No answer or reply while noon was fast approaching. So I called her landline at home. Her husband picked up and told me she was not home, and I explained very briefly why I was trying to get a hold of her. Less than an hour before noon, my boss called, furious that I had been so insistent on getting a hold of her and that I had created a state of stress and emergency at her house. Her home number was for emergencies only, and this was not an emergency according to her. "It is not professional to call people when they are not at work," she told me. She got everything under control, and she was now sending the work to the client directly. When she arrived at the office, she gave me a big scolding in person and told me that I do need to hound other freelancers, but not her. It was her business, and she got everything handled. She knew all the clients, and they were clients because of her. She looked me in the eye and told me, "If I take over a task, it is not your task anymore, it is my task. You don't need to bother me with reminders. You just give me the instructions from the client and I will handle everything myself. From that point on, your job is done. I never ever miss deadlines. If the client calls, you tell them I'm on it and you don't call me or text me about it." Well, fair enough, I apologized for the stress and repeated the new instructions back to her for confirmation. She was very happy with that and confirmed that I had understood everything. She once more gave me her favorite lecture about how she is paying me, minimum wage, for me to use my brain, with a lot of condescending examples of how she always uses her brain, unlike us normal workers. I could only nod along, as if her narcissistic rant was actually teaching anybody anything. About a month or so later, another client comes in with an order. I accepted it and my boss was available to handle it, so I forwarded everything to her and I considered my work in regard to that order done as instructed. On the day of the deadline, I was on vacation and was hiking in a remote area with spotty cell coverage. The other office assistant called me and told me the client had called the office to check if the work was ready. I told my colleague that our boss was on it and that we did not need to worry as our boss was gonna handle it, and that my clear instructions were to tell the client that our boss was personally on it, the task would be done by the deadline, and explicitly not to call our boss to remind her of the deadline. Then, since I was on vacation, I needed to conserve my battery and everything at the office was handled. I switched off my phone. Well, an approaching deadline that my boss had to meet was explicitly not an emergency according to my boss. Also, I had recently realized that my boss had knowingly misled me about the career opportunities this job was affording me, so I was not gonna be on call on my rare day off. While I was hiking without a care in the world, my boss had managed to forget about the deadline. By the time she realized she had missed it, the office was closed. My boss had urgently finished the work, but it turned out she did not know the client so well, as she did not have their contact details. As the order was in the office and my phone was off, she had to go there herself, fetch it, and use the contact details to deliver the work late. This was particularly embarrassing as my colleague had informed the client our boss was personally doing the work for them. When I came back to work, it was pandemonium. She screamed at me, but I simply pointed out that everything I had done was following her instructions. "Why did you do this? You told me to. Why didn't you do that? You told me not to." She was fuming, but she knew I was correct and I had acted exactly as instructed by her. She also screamed at me for my phone being off, but I said I needed to conserve my battery for emergencies, and this was clearly not an emergency, and I'm not on call while on vacation anyway. Malicious compliance for the win, right? Well, narcissists never accept blame, and she had an idea of how to shift the blame to me after all. "But you did not provide me with the client's contact details with the order assignment. How could I have delivered them the work? It was your fault for not providing me with all the information." I pointed out that she told me she knew all the clients personally, but if she had used her brain like she is constantly telling us to, she could have easily noticed that the order instructions were on the client's letterhead with all their contact details spelled out. Literally on every single page, bottom and top. Now, that was a huge slap to her fragile ego, and remembering her face at that moment still makes me smile. Needless to say, I was fired. Of course, I did not mind though. Don't you just love happy endings? And yeah guys, even though that is not exactly a happy ending because OP got fired, I would still say OP is now in a better place. Who the hell would want to work in such a toxic work environment? If you have ever had such an awful boss, please let me know your story in the comments. I would love to hear it. And the last one is a story from r/pettyrevenge to end the video in a nice way. It is titled, "Throw your purse on my feet so you can have more for your oversized carry-on? Well, good luck finding it." So I'm someone who struggles with being overly kind and accommodating, especially on planes. I'm a small person, and people usually assume that means they can encroach on my space on planes instead of just upgrading themselves to a more accommodating seat. Finally, I was fed up and knew I no longer wanted to sacrifice my sustainability and comfort for selfish, undeserving humans. I have the window seat and someone who has boarded quite late comes in pushing her oversized carry-on, winter coat, purse and a shaggy blanket onto me. She did not push her carry-on under her seat because it couldn't fit. She throws the shaggy blanket onto my seat. While I'm sitting there, she places her purse on my feet, places her headphones on and closes her eyes, as if I am invisible. I move the blanket and purse back to her side. The flight attendant comes around and tells her about her luggage. She ignores and they assume she cannot hear them. She continues to ignore and they tap her shoulder. She ignores, they shake her shoulder and she finally follows their instructions. Before you know it, her coat, blanket and purse are on my side again. She is fast asleep, elbows flung and having sweet dreams. Do my best to move her things. Now her mouth is open and she has terrible nighttime breath. Cool. Well, we're about to land. She is wide awake and on her phone. Puts her gross blanket back on me so she has more room, but finally I get assertive. She then yanks her blanket as if I'm in the wrong for not wanting her things all over me and my space. Plane lands, she gets up aggressively and charges off the plane with a foul attitude, except she forgot to grab her purse. Well, normally I would have said, "Oh hey, looks like you forgot something." Well, it's not my job to help nasty entitled individuals. The flight attendant surely will catch her before she leaves the gate, right? Nope. I see her walk through the food court and through the ground transportation doors. I wonder how far she will get without her purse. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow. And by the way, don't forget to subscribe.